It was a dreary autumn day in Greenwich Village. The streets were deserted, and the trees stood bare, their leaves long gone. In a small studio, two artists, Sue and Johnsy, sat by the window, watching the rain fall. Johnsy, a young woman, lay in bed, her face pale and weak. She had been ill for weeks, and Sue was worried about her. "Look out the window, dear," Sue said, trying to distract Johnsy from her gloom. "See the last leaf on the ivy vine? It's the last one left." Johnsy barely raised her head. "I'm so tired of leaves," she whispered. "I'm so tired of everything." Sue tried to cheer her up, but Johnsy just closed her eyes and turned away. Sue tried to rouse Johnsy from her melancholy, but nothing seemed to work. As the days went by, Johnsy grew weaker and weaker. One day, she called Sue to her bedside and whispered, "I'm going to die. I know it, and I'm so afraid." Sue tried to reassure her, but Johnsy just shook her head. "I'm not afraid of death," she said. "I'm afraid of the rain. It's so cold and gray. And the leaves, all gone. Oh, Sue, I'm so afraid of being alone in the dark." Sue held her hand tight, trying to comfort her. But Johnsy just closed her eyes and whispered, "The last leaf. It's the last leaf." Sue was very worried about Johnsy. She was getting weaker every day. Sue tried to make her feel better, but nothing seemed to work. Johnsy was sad and scared. She didn't want to die. One day, an old man came to visit. His name was Behrman. He was a painter, just like Sue and Johnsy. He was a kind man, with a big heart. "Hello, Johnsy," he said, smiling. "How are you feeling today?" Johnsy looked at him with sad eyes. "I'm going to die," she said. "I know it." Behrman looked at Johnsy with surprise. "Die?" he said. "No, no, no. You're not going to die. You're just sick. You need some medicine and some rest." Johnsy shook her head. "No, Behrman. I know it. I can feel it. And I'm so scared." Behrman sat down beside her bed. "Don't be scared, Johnsy," he said. "We'll take care of you. Sue and I will make you better." Johnsy looked out the window. "The last leaf, it's still there," she said. "But it won't be there for long. And when it's gone, I'll be gone too." Sue and Behrman looked at each other worriedly. They didn't know what to do. Johnsy was getting weaker and weaker. They tried to make her eat, but she refused. They tried to make her drink, but she wouldn't. Behrman went to the window and looked out. The last leaf was still there, clinging to the branch. He had an idea. "Johnsy," he said, turning to her. "If I can make that last leaf stay on the branch, will you try to get better?" Johnsy looked at him with a tiny bit of hope in her eyes. "Yes, yes, Behrman. If you can make the leaf stay, I'll try." Behrman smiled. "I'll do it, Johnsy. I promise." Behrman went out into the rain and looked at the last leaf. It was a big, red leaf, and it was clinging to the branch with all its might. Behrman knew he had to do something to make it stay. He went back to his studio and got his paints and brushes. He went back to the window and started painting. He painted the last leaf, and the branch it was on, and the wall behind it. As he painted, something strange happened. The last leaf started to look stronger and stronger. It was as if Behrman's painting was giving it life. Johnsy saw it from her bed and smiled. "It's staying, Behrman," she said. "The last leaf is staying." Behrman kept painting, adding more and more details to the leaf and the wall. He painted the raindrops on the leaf, and the way the light shone through it. He painted the tiny cracks in the wall, and the way the leaf's stem was attached to the branch. As he painted, the last leaf started to look more and more real. It was as if it was actually growing on the wall. Johnsy's eyes were fixed on it, and she was smiling. Sue came over and looked at the painting. "Behrman, it's amazing," she said. "You're a genius." Behrman smiled. "It's not just the painting," he said. "It's the magic of art. I'm making the last leaf stay for Johnsy." Johnsy's eyes were shining with hope. She was starting to believe that she would get better, that the last leaf would stay on the branch. She was so focused on the painting that she didn't even notice the rain had stopped outside. The sun was starting to shine through the clouds, casting a warm glow over the studio. Sue and Behrman were smiling at each other, happy to see Johnsy's spirits lifted. But just then, a strong gust of wind blew through the studio, rattling the windows and doors. Johnsy's eyes went wide with fear. "The last leaf," she cried. "It's going to fall." Behrman quickly finished his painting, adding a few final touches to the last leaf. And then, just as the wind was about to blow it away, he stepped back and said, "There. It's done." The wind howled and buffeted the studio, but the last leaf stayed put. It was as if Behrman's painting had given it a new lease on life. Johnsy's face lit up with joy. "It's staying," she exclaimed. "The last leaf is staying." Sue and Behrman cheered and hugged each other. They had done it. They had saved the last leaf, and they had saved Johnsy's life. From that day on, Johnsy started to get better. She sat up in bed, and then she stood up, and finally she was walking around the studio again. Sue and Behrman were overjoyed to see her recovering. And every day, Johnsy would look out the window at the last leaf, still clinging to the branch. It was a reminder of the power of art and friendship. As she regained her strength, Johnsy started painting again. She painted beautiful pictures of leaves and trees and flowers. And every time she painted, she felt a little bit stronger. One day, Behrman came to Johnsy's studio with a big smile on his face. "Johnsy, my dear," he said, "I have a surprise for you." He led her to the window and pulled back the curtain. And there, on the branch outside, was a brand new leaf. It was small and green, and it was clinging to the branch just like the last leaf had. Johnsy gasped in amazement. "A new leaf," she exclaimed. "Oh, Behrman, it's a miracle." Behrman chuckled. "Not a miracle, my dear," he said. "Just the power of nature. And the power of art." Johnsy was overjoyed. She felt like she had been given a new lease on life. She started painting again, and her art was more beautiful than ever. Sue and Behrman were happy to see her thriving. They knew that the last leaf had been a symbol of hope, and now the new leaf was a symbol of new life. As the days went by, Johnsy's paintings became famous. People came from all over to see her beautiful artwork. And every time they looked at her paintings, they remembered the story of the last leaf and the power of art and friendship. Johnsey's studio became a place of inspiration for many. People would come and see her paintings, and they would leave feeling uplifted and hopeful. And every time they looked out the window, they would see the new leaf, still clinging to the branch. The new leaf became a symbol of hope for the whole community. It reminded them that even in the darkest times, there is always the possibility of new life and new beginnings. And Johnsey, Sue, and Behrman were happy to have been a part of it. They knew that their friendship and their art had made a difference in the world. Years went by, and Johnsey's studio became a legendary place. People would come from far and wide to see the paintings and the famous last leaf. And every time they looked at the leaf, they would remember the story of Johnsey and her friends, and how art and friendship had saved her life. Johnsey, Sue, and Behrman grew old together, but they never forgot the power of art and friendship. They kept painting and creating, inspiring new generations to do the same. And the last leaf? It never fell. It stayed on the branch, a symbol of hope and new beginnings, reminding everyone who saw it of the magic of art and friendship. It was the year 1912, and the world was abuzz with excitement as the RMS Titanic, the largest and most luxurious ocean liner in the world, prepared to set sail on its maiden voyage from Southampton, England to New York City, USA. The ship was a marvel of modern technology, touted as unsinkable and the pinnacle of luxury and comfort. Among the passengers were Jack Dawson, a penniless artist who had won his ticket to board the ship in a poker game, and Rose DeWitt Bukater, a high society girl traveling with her mother, Ruth, and her fiancé, Cal Hockley, a wealthy and ruthless businessman. As the ship set sail, Jack and Rose found themselves drawn to each other, bonding over their shared sense of adventure and desire for freedom. Jack was captivated by Rose's beauty and grace, while Rose was inspired by Jack's carefree spirit and passion for art. Despite their different backgrounds, they found themselves spending more and more time together, exploring the ship's opulent decks and sharing stories of their dreams and aspirations. Little did they know, their chance encounter would lead to a romance that would change their lives forever. As the Titanic sailed across the ocean, Jack and Rose grew closer. They walked on the deck, watching the sunset and talking about their hopes and dreams. Jack wanted to be a famous artist, while Rose wanted to escape her wealthy but unhappy life. One day, Jack showed Rose his drawings. She was impressed and encouraged him to pursue his passion. Jack was happy to have found a friend who understood him. Rose's mother, Ruth, was not happy about her daughter's friendship with Jack. She thought Jack was not good enough for Rose and wanted her to marry Cal, a rich and powerful man. Cal was cruel and controlling, and Rose was afraid of him. She felt trapped in her life and longed for freedom and love. Jack's kindness and friendship gave her hope for a better future. One evening, Jack and Rose decided to sneak away from the formal dinner party and enjoy a picnic on the ship's deck. They laughed and talked, feeling free and happy. As they sat on a bench, Jack drew a picture of Rose in his sketchbook. She was impressed by his talent and felt special that he wanted to capture her likeness. Just then, Cal appeared, angry and drunk. He accused Rose of flirting with Jack and threatened to ruin his reputation. Jack stood up to Cal, defending Rose and himself. Rose was grateful for Jack's bravery and felt a strong connection to him. She realized she couldn't marry Cal and live a life she didn't want. As the night went on, Jack and Rose grew closer, sharing secrets and dreams. They knew they came from different worlds, but they felt a deep bond. The next day, Jack and Rose went on an adventure around the ship. They explored the cargo holds, the engine rooms, and even the crew's quarters. They laughed and joked, feeling like they were in their own little world. As they wandered, they stumbled upon a third-class party in full swing. Jack, being a third-class passenger himself, was welcomed with open arms. Rose, however, was hesitant at first, but soon found herself dancing and singing along with the others. For the first time, Rose felt like she was part of something real, something genuine. She saw the joy and camaraderie among the third-class passengers and realized that wealth and status weren't everything. Jack and Rose spent the rest of the day together, enjoying the party and each other's company. As the sun began to set, they found a quiet spot on the deck to watch the stars come out. As they gazed up at the sky, Jack turned to Rose and said, "You're different, Rose. You're not like the others." Rose smiled, knowing exactly what he meant. As the night wore on, Jack and Rose found themselves at the ship's rail, looking out at the endless ocean. They talked about their dreams, their fears, and their hopes for the future. Rose confided in Jack about her engagement to Cal, and how she felt trapped and suffocated by her wealthy upbringing. Jack listened intently, offering words of encouragement and support. "I can't marry him, Jack," Rose said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't spend the rest of my life with someone who doesn't love me for who I am." Jack took her hand, his eyes shining with understanding. "You deserve so much better, Rose. You deserve to be happy." As they stood there, the wind whipping their hair and the stars twinkling above, Jack and Rose shared a moment of pure connection. It was as if the entire world had come to a standstill, and all that mattered was the two of them. As the days passed, Jack and Rose's friendship blossomed into something more. They would steal glances at each other during meals, and find excuses to run into each other on the deck. One afternoon, while Rose was out for a walk, Jack snuck into the first-class lounge and played a beautiful melody on the piano. Rose, entranced by the music, followed the sound and found Jack sitting at the keys. As she listened, mesmerized, Jack began to sing a soft, soulful ballad. His voice was like nothing she had ever heard before, raw, emotional, and full of passion. Rose felt her heart skip a beat as she realized that Jack was singing directly to her. The lyrics spoke of love, freedom, and following your heart, everything she had been longing for. When the song ended, Jack looked up, his eyes locking onto hers. Rose felt a spark of electricity run through her entire body. From that moment on, Jack and Rose's relationship became harder to hide. They would meet in secret, sneaking away from the prying eyes of Cal and Rose's mother. One night, they decided to take a risk and attend a party in third class together. They danced and laughed, surrounded by people who didn't judge them. As the night wore on, they found themselves on the ship's stern, watching the sunset over the ocean. Jack took Rose's hand, and she didn't pull away. "I have something to show you," Jack said, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "Follow me." He led her to a small room on the ship's deck, filled with his artwork and sketches. In the center of the room, he had painted a beautiful mural of the two of them, standing together on the bow of the ship, with the wind in their hair and the sun on their faces. Rose gasped, tears in her eyes. "Jack, it's beautiful," she whispered. Jack took her hand, his voice full of emotion. "I want to spend the rest of my life making you happy, Rose. Will you be with me?" Rose's heart raced as she looked at the mural, then into Jack's eyes. She knew she had to make a choice. She could stay with Cal, the man her mother had chosen for her, or she could take a chance on Jack, the penniless artist who had captured her heart. "I'll be with you, Jack," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack's face lit up with joy. He pulled her into his arms, and they shared a passionate kiss as the sun dipped below the horizon. But their happiness was short-lived. Cal, who had been searching for Rose, appeared at the door, his face twisted with anger and jealousy. "You'll pay for this, Jack," he snarled, his eyes blazing with hatred. Rose stood tall, her heart pounding in her chest. "I won't go back to you, Cal," she said, her voice firm. "I've made my choice." Cal sneered, but Jack stood his ground, ready to defend the woman he loved. Cal's face turned red with rage, and he lunged at Jack, but Rose stepped in between them. "Stop, Cal. Leave him alone." Cal sneered at her, but Jack stood firm, his fists clenched. "I won't back down, Cal. I won't let you bully us." The scene was attracting attention, and soon a small crowd had gathered. Rose's mother, Ruth, pushed her way through, her face pale with shock. "Rose, what are you doing?" she demanded. "You're engaged to Cal, not some artist." Rose stood tall, her voice clear. "I've made my choice, Mother. I won't marry Cal. I'll follow my heart, not your wishes." Ruth's face turned cold, and she pointed a trembling finger at Jack. "You're a fool, Rose. This boy will ruin your life." Jack smiled, his eyes never leaving Rose's face. "I'll make her happy, Mrs. DeWitt Bukater. That's a promise." The crowd began to murmur, and Cal's face turned uglier than ever. "You'll pay for this, Jack," he snarled, and stormed off, leaving the group in an uncomfortable silence. The scene had caused a stir, and soon the whole ship was talking about the confrontation between Jack, Rose, Cal, and Ruth. Rose's mother was furious, and she demanded that Rose stay away from Jack. But Rose was determined to follow her heart. She and Jack continued to see each other in secret, stealing glances and kisses whenever they could. One night, they decided to take a risk and slip away from the formal dinner party. They made their way to the ship's deck, where they found a quiet spot to talk and dream. As they stood there, looking out at the ocean, Jack turned to Rose and said, "I have a feeling that we're meant to be together, Rose. That we're meant to make a new life, free from all the rules and expectations." Rose smiled, her heart full of hope. "I feel it too, Jack. Let's make it happen. Let's make our own destiny." Just then, the ship's lookout shouted, "Iceberg ahead," and the deck erupted into chaos. The crew scrambled to avoid the iceberg, but it was too late. The ship hit the ice with a loud crash, and the sound echoed through the decks. Rose and Jack were thrown off balance, but they managed to hold onto each other. They looked up to see the crew rushing to launch the lifeboats. "We have to get out of here, Rose," Jack said, his voice urgent. "The ship is going down." Rose's eyes widened in horror as she realized the truth. She had never felt so alive, so determined to survive. They made their way to the lifeboats, but the crew was only allowing women and children to board. Jack tried to push Rose forward, but she refused to leave him behind. "I won't go without you, Jack," she said, her voice firm. Jack's face was filled with a mix of sadness and determination. "You have to, Rose. You have to live." Just then, Cal appeared, his face twisted with anger and desperation. "You'll never take her away from me, Jack," he snarled, and lunged at them with a knife. Jack pushed Rose out of the way just in time, and Cal's knife missed her by inches. Jack and Cal struggled, but Jack was determined to protect Rose. In the chaos, Rose found herself separated from Jack. She was pushed onto a lifeboat, and as it pulled away from the ship, she saw Jack standing alone, his eyes locked onto hers. "Jack," she screamed, but he just shook his head and mouthed, "Go," before turning to help others board the lifeboats. Rose was left with a choice: wait for Jack or escape the sinking ship. She knew Jack would never leave Cal behind, and the ship was going down fast. Tears streaming down her face, Rose made the hardest decision of her life. She stayed in the lifeboat, praying that Jack would find a way to survive. As the boat pulled away from the Titanic, Rose watched in horror as the ship went down, taking over 1,500 people with it. She knew she would never forget Jack and the sacrifice he made for her. The survivors in the lifeboat were left to face the freezing ocean and the uncertainty of their future. Rose was left to wonder if she would ever see Jack again. The survivors in the lifeboat were rescued by the crew of the RMS Carpathia, which had arrived on the scene several hours after the Titanic sank. Rose was taken aboard, where she was given food, clothing, and medical attention. As she recovered from her ordeal, Rose couldn't shake the feeling that she had lost a part of herself in the disaster. She thought of Jack constantly, wondering if he had survived, and if she would ever see him again. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. Rose returned to New York, where she was greeted as a hero and a survivor of the Titanic tragedy. But she couldn't shake the feeling of guilt and sadness that had settled in her heart. Years went by, and Rose became a successful artist, using her talents to paint the scenes of the Titanic and its tragic fate. But she never forgot Jack and the sacrifice he made for her. One day, an old man appeared at her doorstep, his eyes twinkling with a familiar sparkle. It was Jack, who had survived the disaster by clinging to a piece of debris and being rescued by the Carpathia's crew. They spent the rest of their lives together, painting, loving, and remembering the tragic fate of the Titanic, and the sacrifice that Jack had made for the woman he loved. And so, the story of Jack and Rose became a legend, a testament to the power of love and sacrifice, and a reminder of the tragic fate of the Titanic. The Titanic story teaches us many profound lessons. First and foremost, it underscores the importance of humility and respect for nature. The Titanic was built with the best technology of its time and was considered unsinkable. This overconfidence led many to believe that nothing could go wrong. However, nature proved otherwise. The iceberg that struck the Titanic was a stark reminder that no matter how advanced we think we are, nature's power can still surprise and overpower us. This teaches us that we must always respect the natural world and acknowledge that we cannot control everything. Another important lesson from the Titanic is the danger of overconfidence. The ship's builders and owners were so confident in its design and construction that they did not see the need for sufficient safety measures, such as an adequate number of lifeboats. They believed that the Titanic was so well built that it could never sink, and that even if it faced trouble, help would arrive quickly. This overconfidence proved to be fatal. The Titanic did sink, and there were not enough lifeboats to save everyone on board. This teaches us that overconfidence can lead to negligence and disastrous consequences. We should always prepare for the worst, even if we believe we are safe and secure. The Titanic disaster also highlights the importance of being prepared. When the ship hit the iceberg, it became clear that there were not enough lifeboats for all the passengers and crew. The crew was not adequately trained for such an emergency, and the evacuation process was chaotic and unorganized. This lack of preparation resulted in a much higher death toll than necessary. Being prepared for emergencies, having adequate safety measures in place, and ensuring that everyone knows what to do in case of a disaster can save lives. This is a crucial lesson not only for maritime travel but for all aspects of life. Listening to warnings is another key lesson from the Titanic story. During its voyage, the Titanic's crew received several warnings about icebergs in the area. However, these warnings were not taken seriously enough, and the ship continued to sail at high speed. When the lookout finally spotted an iceberg directly in the ship's path, it was too late to avoid a collision. Ignoring or not adequately responding to warnings can lead to avoidable disasters. This teaches us the importance of taking cautions and alerts seriously, whether they come from other people, technology, or our own intuition. Furthermore, the tragedy of the Titanic highlights the value of every human life. On board the Titanic were people from all walks of life, from wealthy first-class passengers to hopeful immigrants in third class. When the ship began to sink, the stark differences in survival chances based on social class became evident. Many more first-class passengers survived compared to those in third class, partly because of their privileged access to lifeboats. This inequality in survival is a powerful reminder that every human life is valuable and deserves equal consideration and protection. It teaches us the moral imperative of ensuring fairness and equality in safety provisions and emergency responses. The Titanic disaster also led to significant changes in maritime safety regulations. After the tragedy, new rules were implemented to ensure that ships carried enough lifeboats for all passengers, maintained safer speeds, and improved communication in dangerous areas. This teaches us that we can learn from our mistakes and make positive changes to prevent similar disasters in the future. The lessons from the Titanic have led to advancements in safety that have saved countless lives since then. In conclusion, the story of the Titanic is a powerful narrative that teaches us many important lessons. It reminds us to respect the forces of nature, to avoid overconfidence, to be prepared for emergencies, to listen to warnings, and to value every human life. It also shows us that we can learn from our mistakes and make positive changes to improve safety and prevent future tragedies. The Titanic's tragic end serves as a solemn lesson that even the mightiest creations can be vulnerable, and that humility, caution, and equal respect for all are essential virtues in the face of the unknown.